Happy Friday, everyone, and welcome back for a new episode of Toybox Tutorials. One of the most memorable features of classic Disney films is, of course, the music. Whenever I hear a Disney song, I will often remember the movie scene that accompanied it and the emotion that I felt. And the same, of course, is true for just about every TV show and a lot of video games. Music is a big part of the experience. And so for Disney Infinity 3.0, the developers added two brand new Creativitoys that allow you to add your own custom music to your toy boxes. These two toys are the Music Note Creator and the Metronome. Now, I could not find any tutorials for these two toys anywhere online. I did find a tips and tricks video that Disney produced for Toybox TV that discussed these two toys and showed a simple example, but they really didn't go into any kind of depth to explain how these toys worked. And so I think my tutorial here may actually be the first full tutorial for these toys. I have a lot of material to cover, and so I'm going to split this tutorial up into two videos. Today we're going to focus exclusively on the Music Note Creator, which allows you to play individual music notes, and I'll show you some examples of how you can use this toy by itself. And next week we'll look at the Metronome, which allows you to combine individual music notes together into a song. And so as we get started, you will find the Music Note Creator in the Instant Fun category, and I'll just drop one here for us to play with. And again, this toy allows you to play a single musical note. And if we go into Spark mode, open up the logic menu for this toy, and we look at the properties, there's a number of properties that you can specify for this. You can actually play a musical note when you step on the toy, and this is turned on by default. If you don't want that, you can turn it off. Or you can play the note when you step off of the toy. By default, that's off, but you can turn that on. You can have it do both if you'd like, or neither. Then you have a property called Default Note. So when you step on this toy, this is the note that it will play. And if you select this, you can pick any note, including sharps and flats. So that is really good. You can specify which octave you want to play in, and this will go anywhere from 0 to 8. The default is 4. Excuse me. I'll skip that for a second. For the duration, this is the length of the note. By default, it's half a second, 500 milliseconds. And this will go all the way down to 100 milliseconds, or a tenth of a second, all the way up to 5,000. So you can play this note for 5 seconds. Not sure why you'd want to play a note that long, but you can do it. And then, of course, we have the volume, and this goes from 1 to 10, 5 being the default volume. And you also have a field here called Instruments. And if we select that, you can use a piano or a trumpet or a bassoon. So you have 3 instruments that you can use to play this particular note. And so by default, it's C in the 4th octave. So if you step on the toy, that's the note. Now this toy also has some behaviors, and I dropped this little trigger out here. So if we select this and do a new logic connection when this is stepped on, by any we'll say, we can come over to our Music Note Creator, and if I open that up, you have several options here. You can play the default note, and this is the note that you're going to specify in the properties for the Music Note Creator. This would be the note and the octave, the volume level, the duration, the instrument, all of that. This plays what you set in the properties. You can also play a specific note in any octave you want. So if we chose, for example, to play a note in octave 5, and we chose to play the D note, then when we come out here and step on our trigger, So it's different than the note that we set in the properties there. And so you can invoke this to play any kind of a note with a logic connection. The caveat is that even though you can play any note, it's only going to use the instrument and the duration and the volume that are specified in the properties. So you can't have this play a note of any different length or different volume than what you have set in here. So the logic connection for playing a note on this is limited. Really, this toy is for one note, the one you specify in the properties. And the fact that you can use a logic connection to play other notes is great, but it's kind of limiting and not very practical. And I'll go ahead and delete that link. And I believe that is all of the behaviors. We'll just come back over here and I'll show you that. So you can play the default note or a note in any of the 8 octaves. All right, let's go ahead and delete that because we don't need it. Now you also have some logic connections for this toy. So if we look at this, this will broadcast a number of trigger signals. We have any note played, and so whether you play this note that's set in the properties or whether you play a note through a logic connection, whatever note this toy plays, it'll broadcast this signal. Whenever the default note is played, it'll broadcast this signal. And then whenever a specific note is played in any octave, then it'll broadcast one of these. And so that's kind of helpful. And that's really it for the Music Note Creator. It's a pretty simple toy. And next week when we talk about the metronome, I'll show you how to use this toy to create your own custom music in the toy box. But you can do so much more with this toy, and so for today's episode I want to show you how to use it to create a simple musical puzzle. So let me delete that for right now. And what we're going to do is we're going to use the Music Note Creator to set up a musical lock for this door. Now right now if we come out of the editor, I can just run right through this door into the castle beyond. But I'd like to set up a puzzle for that. And again, we're going to use the Music Note Creator for this. This is something that Disney's official tips and tricks video showed, but it didn't actually explain how you would implement it. So I'm going to show you how to do that. The door is going to be locked at the start, and we're going to place 6 musical notes out here, like this. And to open the door, the player has to play 3 specific notes in a specific order. And we'll also set up a townsperson who will play the required notes for the player, and then the player can figure out how to recreate those notes in the right order. So the first thing we'll do is set up each of the notes. And we're going to leave this one set at C. And we'll leave all the other properties fine. We're going to play with the other properties next week. But we'll set this one to D, and we'll just kind of go up the scale here. This one we'll set to E. So we're going to make all of these notes different. This will be F. And as you can see, it takes a little time to set up each of these notes, because you're dealing with one note at a time. So I have found that using these toys, especially if you're trying to generate music, is a little bit tedious and it takes some time. But it is worth it, as you're going to see at the end of next week, and hopefully even today. So for the last one here, we'll set this to A. So there's our 6 notes. Alright, so as we start this off, we're going to use the level starter to set up things that we want. And I've got some logic gates that I've placed out here ahead of time. So these 2 logic gates here, you can think of as the tumblers for the lock. And so as we're working these musical notes, we want to open the tumblers So by default, both of these gates will be closed. This one we're going to use as a reset, and this is just going to save us some logic connections. And so what we'll do on this one is a new logic connection on output. We're going to close both of these gates because we want this door locked. So we're going to close the tumblers. So on output from this gate, we'll close that one. These two gates over here are really just to help us so that when the player is stepping on these, we only want them to step on a note one time. We're not going to repeat notes. And so if the player happens to step on one of the notes that unlocks one of these gates over here, if they step on it a second time, we want to cancel the whole thing. And so these gates are going to help us do that. Both of those should be in the open state by default. So on output from our reset gate, make sure that both of these are open. So on output, we'll open up the other gate. All right, and from our level starter over here, we're going to do a new logic connection on catalyze. We'll go ahead and invoke the reset logic gate. We'll input into that to set up all of the logic gates in the correct defaults. And on the level starter, a new logic connection on catalyze will come over and make sure this door is closed. And with the logic connection then, we cannot open this door now by walking up to it, as I've shown you in a video, a very early video, I think episode 7 or 8 or something like that. So it can only be opened with a logic connection. And then we'll use this button here to invoke the level starter, since we're already in the level. All right, so we'll come out, we'll push the button. That puts the door over here in the correct state. Now as you see, it won't open when we walk up to it. And the logic gates here are all in the correct state. All right, so for the key here to unlock that door, I'm going to have the player step on this one, then this one, and then this one. Okay? So middle, bottom, middle, top, lower, left. That's going to be the order to unlock my door. Okay. So all of the other gates, or all the other music notes, if they step on one of those, we want to cancel the whole thing. So on this music note, we'll do a new logic connection. When the default note is played, we're going to input into our reset gate. And the same thing for these two notes over on the end. When the default note is played, reset our puzzle. And when the default note is played on this one, reset the puzzle. So those were easy. All right, when they step on the first one here in the sequence, we want to open up this first gate. But I don't want to do that directly, because if they jump up and down on this and select this note a second time, I want to cancel the whole thing. And so what we're going to do is route the signal through this first logic gate over here. So on this musical note, when the default note is played, we will attempt to input into this gate, which the first time we do this should be fine because the gate will be open by default. On this gate, new logic connection on output. We'll go ahead and open up this first logic gate. Now if they jump on this toy a second time, we want to make sure this is closed so this doesn't happen. So on this gate, once this gate is open, so a new logic connection, when the gate is open, we want to come over and close this. So the first time they step on this, it will input into this logic gate, which will come over here and open up the first tumbler, which will then close this gate. So now if the player jumps on here a second time, it will try to input into the gate, but the gate is closed. And so on this logic gate, a new logic connection, when the input is blocked, we want to reset. So we'll come over here to our reset gate and input. All right, so that's pretty straightforward. Now when they step on the second one, this is going to be very similar. So we're going to do a new logic connection on that one. When the default note is played, we'll route it through this gate, which by default again is open. And this time, on this gate, a new logic connection. On output from this gate, we're going to have this try to input into here. Okay? So, if they step on this one first, that's going to go through here. That's going to try to go through here, but this gate is closed. So on input blocked from this gate, we want to make sure we reset. So we'll input into there. Okay? But if the signal goes through, then a new logic connection on output from here will open up the second tumbler. And when the second tumbler is open, new logic connection on open, we're going to come over and close this gate. So stepping on here opens up the first gate. Stepping on here will then open up this gate. And if they jump up on this note here a second time, it will try to input into this gate again, which will be closed. And so a new logic connection on here when the input is blocked. We'll go ahead and reset the puzzle. All right, so these two gates again are just handling the case where the player presses one of these notes twice. Okay, it aborts the puzzle on the second jump. So this opens the first logic gate on the left. This one opens the second logic gate on the left. The third gate then, when the default note is played for this one, we're going to attempt to input into this second gate. If this isn't open, then we want to abort the puzzle and reset it. So we'll input into our reset gate. If this is open, then on output from this gate, then we want to open our door. Okay? And there we go. Okay, so to demo this, I think I've already pressed this button, but it's not going to hurt to press it again. Okay, so if we step on this note, this is the final note in the sequence, nothing happens because both of those gates are closed. So if we step on this one, and then this one, and then we got to jump to get over here, there we go, the door opened. So our little musical puzzle worked. Let's try it again, and we'll try stepping on notes twice. So first, second, if we jump on here a second time, and then jump on there, it doesn't work. So that's really good. That's what we want. If we jump on here twice, that doesn't work either. It has to be 1, 2, 3. So there we go. Our little musical puzzle for the door works great. Now, the player isn't really going to know which of those to open, and you don't want them just jumping back and forth randomly trying to figure it out. So it would be helpful if they could hear the right tune. So we're going to set up a little townsperson over here to do that, and that's going to show how to invoke these with a logic connection. So I've set up a friendly wave generator here. We'll connect that up to our locator over here. And to save a little time, I already configured the wave, and I added Mulan. And on the properties here, we'll take the generation delay to 0, and we'll set the friend option so that she's standing still. Okay, and then on the level starter, a new logic connection on Catalyze. We'll generate the wave. That will put her over here. And then we'll hook up a dynamic trigger to her. So a new actor connection on the dynamic trigger. We'll connect that up to our friendly wave generator. And on the properties for the dynamic trigger, the target needs to be the connected actor. And we'll set the trigger distance to 6. So what we'll do, since we haven't covered the metronome yet, we're going to use these time delayers. And so the default notes here, I haven't changed the time, so the duration on them is half a second, 500 milliseconds. So we can play the first note directly. The second note, we'll set the delay time to half a second. And we'll leave this one set to 1 second. So it'll play the 3 notes in sequence. That's what we want to have it do. So on our dynamic trigger, a new logic connection, when entered by player any, we'll come over here and have our first note play its default note, the one that's set in properties. On the dynamic trigger, a new logic connection, when entered by player any. Now we don't want to go directly to the next note because it'll end up playing those 2 notes simultaneously. So that's why we have the time delayer here. So we'll start the delay on this one. This is the half-second delay. So a new logic connection, when that delay is completed, we'll play our second note. And on the dynamic trigger, new logic connection, when entered by player any, we'll start the third time, or the second time delayer for the third note. And when that delay is completed, we'll play the last note in the sequence. Okay. So we'll come over to our button to the level starter. That resets our puzzle and also generates our townsperson. If we approach her, so you can walk away from her and walk up as many times as you need to. Now, one of the things I want to point out, if you look over at the musical notes, 2 things I want you to see. First of all, the notes lit up, which is interesting. You don't want to give away the puzzle. But secondly, you'll notice the door opened because this is playing, when the default note is played, that does the puzzle. So having her play those notes is a bad idea. So I wanted to point that out. So let's go ahead and reset. What we need to do instead is duplicate these 3 notes as separate objects. So we're going to do that over here. This is the way you need to do that. But I wanted to show you why we're doing this. All right, so again, this is C, D, E, F, and G. So the sequence is D, G, and C. Okay? So the first note over here needs to be D. That's the first one in our sequence that unlocks the door. The second one is G. And the third one is C, which is the default property. So what we do instead, so we come over here, we're going to delete our link to that first music note creator. And instead, new logic connection, when entered by player Annie, we're going to come over to this note. And this has no logic hooked up to it, so it's not going to mess up our door puzzle. For this one, we're going to break the link to the music note over there. And instead, new logic connection, when the delay is completed, we'll play that note. And likewise with this one, we'll break the link to that music note. New logic connection, when the delay is completed, we'll invoke this one. So now she'll play the notes that we want, but it's not going to interfere with our puzzle. So it's not going to open the door, and it didn't light up the pads over there to give away the sequence. Instead, it's invoking those. So then the player has to come over here and figure out, okay, there we go. So then they have to figure out how to recreate that same sound on their own over there. And then once they do, yay, we opened the door, we can go on in. Hooray, we made it. So that's how the music note creator works. It's a simple toy, but you can do some pretty fun things with it. Next time, we'll look at the metronome, and I'll show you how to use it to add your own custom music to your toy box. And we are actually going to program a song, and that's going to be a lot of fun. You won't want to miss that, so be sure to subscribe to my channel by clicking my photo in the lower right corner of this video. I'd also appreciate it if you'd leave a comment and let me know what you think of this tutorial and the music note creator. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for watching. Have a great weekend.